everyone. Welcome to another edition of Mic'd Up Sports, the show that goes in depth with the people who build our sports community. If you followed our live edition with Crystal Thomas, as we noted to start that episode, we'll do so here. The sports world taking some unprecedented measures in the last week, really changing the conversation and the focus on what sports can do for athletes, fans, and the community. And joining me are a group of folks who are knee-deep in athletics, especially basketball. We have the Holmans with us. And why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves to the masses?
You go first.
I am Mark Holman.
I'm Denny Holman.
Allie Holman.
Ava Holman.
And Mark and Allie, you may have recognized them on Core Camper. Allie, of course, taping segments for WCCO, CBS Minnesota. And I understand you also have some national syndication.
Yes, yeah, I've been doing TV locally and nationally for about 15 years.
And Ava finished up her 8th grade season at Osseo, finished up her summer season in AAU, and will be taking part in a national tournament in Indianapolis. And Demi won her first state championship in AAU basketball. So I imagine, Demi, in a few years, we're going to be hearing all about you as the #1 prospect in your class, right?
That's right.
That's right. That's the plan.
And before we get into a conversation that has commanded our attention in this last week, I just want to say, Allie, you spoke of doing TV work for 15 years. I understand you went to school and studied broadcast journalism. And as much as we joke about how small the basketball world is, for those of you who maybe aren't sure of our connection, it was a mutual friend of ours who got us connected. But until that point, I had no idea who any of you were until this last winter when LaToya tagged me about Ava starting varsity as an 8th grader. And I have to imagine for the two of you who get recognized frequently, that was probably amusing to hear that there are still people out there.
I heard you have some posters up in your room, so we might have to verify that story.
You've discovered my secret. Yes, I secretly have a poster of all of the TV personalities I've met.
Yes, right.
No, actually, though, it is kind of amusing, interesting, because the more you do sports coverage and other topics or other facets, the more you get to see people and away from their day job, because I happen to know the Vasileros from Holy Angels, and I'm glad we've become fast friends. Or when I cover Minnehaha Academy and the Miller Sons, it's just amazing and surreal to figure out or to understand who you know and who you don't know and how weird that can be, because again, you're get recognized all the time. And then here's another.
We're basketball parents at the end of the day, like everybody else. Mark also coaches at Osseo, so we have we step away from kind of what we do on the public side, and we literally just become those crazy basketball parents on the sideline, just like everybody else. So I think it's definitely, you don't understand it until you have been through it. And we dedicate, if we're not working, we dedicate our lives to our kids and their sports aspirations. And, the kind of deal that we make with our kids is that they're willing to put in the work. We're willing to put in the time to help them achieve their goals. And so that's kind of the deal we have with our girls. And it really does take up a lot of our life, but we love it.
And I'll say this as the kicker to this preface. I had no idea who you were, and as I got to learn talking with you and Mark over these last few weeks, you guys have been following me for years, so I just find it surreal that you're supposed to be the big names in the Twin Cities, the celebrities, and yet you knew who I was. You were part of my fan club long before I knew of you guys.
Oh, yeah,
I just thought that was funny.
President and co-president.
Right.
Well, LaToya might have something to say about that, but I'm sure. Well, one of my good friends, Nia Holly, told me this years ago. You meet a lot of people through this thing called basketball, and I certainly don't regret all of the friendships that I have built through that. I think Kevin Durant put out a tweet that said, "Are you doing this work for fame, or are you looking to grow?" And I said, jokingly, like, yeah, if I had your level of recognition or fame, maybe I'd get a few more opportunities, but I wouldn't have been able to forge the friendships and relationships that I've built. So yes, it'd be nice to be noticed, but I'll take authenticity any day.
Right, yeah, right. Absolutely, 100%.
So, of course, part of your basketball fandom expands to the pros. I've seen some posts. Mark, I know you and Ava watch a lot of basketball, pros, college prep. That's part of your routine. So I imagine you've been following the WNBA, the NBA, ever since you can remember.
Mhm.
And everyone knew that both leagues were embracing social justice causes. Both leagues put the Black Lives Matter insignia on their bubble courts. But when you found out that the Milwaukee Bucks decided to strike and pause their playoff series, and that action eventually spreading to the WNBA, MLS, Major League Baseball, the NHL, and Naomi Osaka, one of the top tennis players in the world, what did you make of professional sports stopping their games, in some cases in the middle of playoff series, something we have never seen before, to bring attention to what happened to Jacob Blake and all of the other transgressions that have afflicted communities of color?
Well, I thought it was an absolutely amazing step in towards the fight for racial justice for everyone. It makes the casual person pause and really ponder that this is a serious issue, and to educate themselves on why they're actually doing this. We're now starting to get to the point where it's really becoming a real movement, and there is starting to be some change. And by them not playing and raising more awareness to the cause, it just draws more eyeballs to the situation to recognize, yes, there is a problem, and that there are ways that if you choose to get involved in solving the problem, here are ways that you can do it by educating yourself. So I think it's great. I think it should continue. Me personally, I wish it would still continue and they hold out until there is some actual change. But I mean, I'm not a decision maker, but this is a step in the right direction. We just need to continue to keep going and hold people who are in charge accountable for whatever they say. Like, I guess they have come to some agreement that the owners of the NBA are going to agree to do certain things to further the cause, and that if they don't do that, then these players won't come back. And I hope that, one, the owners do what they say they're going to do, and two, if they don't, that the players follow through and just shut it down and hold out till there actually is some change, so that some things can actually happen, so that we don't have to keep waking up every 6 months to someone being murdered by the police.
And for me also, I think it also shows, it really, like everything in the last, especially 4 years, it really shows, it's an eye opener where you really can see where people stand. If they're so bothered and so inconvenienced that they can't turn on basketball, then they're missing the point. And for me, as a white woman, married to a black man with black children, I get an inside look basically of a lot of the things that Mark has to deal with, that even my kids have to deal with. And, you know, it really does show me a lot of people's character, that if they're very inconvenienced that they can't sit down and watch basketball, they're really missing the point of why these players are choosing to do this. These players are already basically in quarantine away from their families. They have sacrificed and done that. And for them to then take a further step and say, now we're acting, and the only reason they're taking this time away from their family is because they love the game of basketball and they want to play. And for them to set that aside and to walk away from it, to say, we need you to pay attention to what we're saying, I really think it's very impactful. It speaks volumes. And like Mark said, I hope more people do it. I hope more people take a stance that maybe will inconvenience them and inconvenience others, because that's what it's going to take. Because when it doesn't affect you on a day-to-day basis, it's really easy to say, oh yeah, well, you know, let's get over this. Or George Floyd, that was months ago, that was a couple months ago. It's really easy, especially for white people, to really ignore these issues. And they continue to happen. It's not every 6 months, it's every 6 hours there's something that's going on. And so it is time. Black people have been telling us for years what's going on. It's time for white people to pay attention and to join in this movement to demand change. And
Ava, do you have anything to add to that? Given how much you follow the college pro. And I had a conversation with a guest yesterday, and I was talking with Adalia McKenzie, your neighbor, a few days ago, also a big fan of the WNBA, NBA. And so these are the players, the people you look up to, and I have to imagine this is leaving some sort of impression on you.
Yeah, I agree with what my dad said. Like, I feel like people just aren't really paying attention to it until something like this happens, which shouldn't be happening. Like, we shouldn't have to be at the point where all of these, like, all of these sports things are just, like, going on a strike, like, just so people, like, pay attention to all the social justice problems that are happening. And I just think it's really sad that there isn't enough, like, awareness for it, and that people should just realize this no matter what skin color you are and just take action.
And something Adalia told me, and we're hoping to bring her on a future podcast, but this really stood out. She had said, much like you, Mark, that she was all for it, that if sports leagues had to pause, had to stop, and let's be clear, it was the players who risked this. They all got together. It was the Bucks who held a 3-1 series lead, and of course we know that's not a certainty as far as making it to the next round. And then to see the other leagues stand up, I wasn't surprised that the WNBA had something to say about this, but a few years ago, I guess the cynic in me thought that no athlete from a men's league would ever risk the multi-million-dollar paychecks. And to find out that I was wrong, well, I was okay with it, because it just reminds you that even if they have the fame and recognition and the following that they've amassed over the years, they're still human. What happened to Jacob Blake brought up some unfortunate memories with the Milwaukee Bucks, other NBA players, and let's not forget the president of the Toronto Raptors dealt with a transgression while his team was in the finals, if I recall. So this isn't just limited to what happened in Kenosha or what happened in Minneapolis back in May. This kind of problem can manifest anywhere. But what did you make of these leagues? I felt it was the next step in a series of progressively larger actions to get our attention. But to see a league stop for the first time in nearly 60 years in the NBA and have other leagues follow suit, I mean, I would say that says a lot about how far professional sports has evolved in terms of addressing social issues.
I would have to say I really commend the WNBA, because this is not new for them. This is something that they have kind of been doing they have been doing
Yes.
for many, many years, and they are unapologetic about making social stands. And I believe that those ladies kind of started this with years ago, and it's not just racial rights; it's sexuality, gay rights and things like that. They are the torchbearers of this social movement. And I feel like the men now have really taken it, the men of the NBA have looked at the WNBA and said, you know what, they're doing something right. We need to get on board with what they're doing. Because what they're doing is working on small scale. Like they're standing for, they were the first group to support Colin Kaepernick, if you really think back about it. So what they did, they're making their small steps in their little circle. And now the NBA which has a much broader reach, can just do what they're doing. There can actually be some change, but I really want to say that the WNBA and those women have really been how you should do it, and how to do it the right way. They have not been, they have not been disrespectful to anyone. They have stayed in their lane, but they have gotten their message across in a very, very effective way, where people have looked at them and they have said, you know what, we can do this, and it's okay for us to do this. And they haven't had to sacrifice any of their paychecks. They haven't been, nothing as negatively has happened to them. So it's almost like they have made it okay for these other leagues to stand up and do what is what is right.
Yeah. Well, and people aren't just born racist. It's you meet sometimes you meet a family and you hear what they have to say and you're like, oh my gosh, they have children, and you realize this is how racism is perpetuated for years and years and generations and generations. There's so many young people who look up to these NBA players who, even if in their home are hearing one thing, they may, it actually really does give everyone time to pause and say, wait a minute. It's even on Instagram. I have a lot of the young white players from Ava's AAU team who follow me, and I follow them back. And it's for the first time ever, I've seen some of these players vocally post about Black Lives Matter and vocally post about Breonna Taylor and things like that. And, you know, I'm proud that these kids are thinking for themselves and really starting to look at these issues as a young adult and make their decision. And I think that's another really impactful thing, is these players have so much power in influencing the next generation and younger people, maybe even sometimes more than their parents. And so I think it's really important to look at the domino effect of speaking out on these issues. You know, it's so much more than money. It's so much more than missing a game. I mean, this is real life. If I can guarantee you that if LeBron James walked into, you know, it was downtown Minneapolis and people didn't recognize him and he's driving a old Ford Taurus or something, he would probably be profiled 100%. And I'm sure he has been. And Mark gets stopped and cops ask him, whose car is he driving? You know, when it's his car. And so there's things like that that, again, is white people, we don't even realize it's not always brutality. It's sometimes it's just the constant harassment, and it will wear a person down to the point where, you know, you're always having to look over your shoulder. You're always having to explain yourself. And as white people, we can't even understand what that would feel like on a daily basis. And so it's important that these players speak out, because so many people of all ages and races are actually listening to them.
And Ava, if you don't mind jumping in as well, with your mother referencing how your teammates in AAU, and I don't know what the mood is like with the high school scene. Well, I guess you're starting high school technically. You were an 8th grader last year, but what are some of the conversations, the pulse? How do you think folks around your age are responding to what has happened over the last few months?
I feel like at the beginning, people didn't really care about it as much, especially people who didn't really like matter towards like if I had like a white friend, they'd just be like, oh, well, this isn't like the most important thing going on. But I feel like as it goes on, and as like more people like celebrities and basketball players and baseball players and all of these athletes are like starting to like take awareness of it and like try to take action, I feel like more and more people, at least my age, are starting to like look up to them and realize that this is not okay and that they need to do something about it and try to help in some way. Even if their parents or their friends don't support it, like they still can care about this and try to make a difference.
And Allie, you brought up a point that I wanted to touch on a couple minutes ago, on how you and we can't fully understand what communities of color are experiencing, but you know, you're highly transparent about your journey, what you believe in. You make it real clear in your social media channels, as I have learned over the last few months as we've gotten to know each other. Mm-hmm. And I go back to the story you shared about how you met Mark and how it was a chapter in this life story of yours that you didn't plan on writing, but looking back on it, it's worked out quite well. But I'm curious what you've learned in that time. I forget exactly what you said, but I think it was along the lines of how you thought your life was going to go in another direction after you finished college and started your television and fitness career. And then mm-hmm. here comes a course correction that has enlightened you in ways that I don't think any of us would have anticipated.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say the college I went to is very diverse. My friend group has always been very diverse. My parents are extremely liberal, extremely accepting. I feel very blessed that I was not raised in an environment, and of course I recognize that I have white privilege, so I'm always looking at things from my experience, and I never want to tell my family or my husband or my kids how they should feel because I have no idea. But I think maybe what you saw, what I was referring to, is a lot of people look at me when Mark and I go places, they don't assume that we are together. I mean, September 18th is our anniversary. We'll be married 16 years. We go, it's still to this day, anywhere we go, they'll look at me and say, can I help you? And they'll look at Mark and say, can I help you? And we can even have our kids with us. And, you know, Mark and I were just talking, we were watching something on TV, and I mean, over 65 years ago, our marriage wasn't even legal. And that's not a very long time ago. And now legal doesn't mean accepted. So to many people now, even being a public figure, I get a lot of people who create fake social media accounts and will send me nasty messages and things like that because they don't approve of an interracial marriage. The thing with me is I don't care. I really don't care. And I don't care if I lose followers. I don't care if I lose viewers. I don't care if I lose customers by speaking out on racial injustice. I am totally okay with you hitting the unfollow button if you don't like me talking about racial injustice. I encourage it if it bothers you that much. Because I think more people in my position that have a semi-platform and you know, I'm a very keep it real, honest, transparent person. More people need to stop being PC and start really talking about the issues. And even if you don't understand it, talking about the issues in a way that, hey, I want to learn more. Because I think, especially in the news media, I'm very disappointed sometimes because I feel like there should be, just like these NBA players and these owners and all are finally stepping out and saying, this is not right. Because they're not trying to please everybody. They're taking a side and saying, this is not right. I feel like more people in the public eye need to do the exact same thing. Because you may risk making some people mad, but again, that's not what this is about. This isn't a friend competition. This is about using your platform to stand up for what is right and speaking out on it. I may have a larger platform than other people, and what a waste if I didn't use that platform to really not only share the experiences of my family, but also show some of maybe white people who follow me who will have zero interaction with any Black people. Show them, hey, this is an experience as a white person. And by the way, I always tell my family, I have a front row seat, and it's very frustrating for me to watch sometimes because there's absolutely nothing I can do. So it's like I have a front row seat of what they have to go through, and all I can do is take that information and say, hey guys, this is really what's going on. This isn't somebody playing the race card. This isn't somebody over exaggerating. This is really going on. And I feel like sometimes it's important for people in my position to step out and do that. And when these NBA players did, it's just like LeBron James, you know, he's not going to shut up and dribble. I'm not going to shut up and just do fitness segments. I'm going to speak out on what is important and what is the right thing to do. And if I didn't do that, I feel like this entire platform I have would be a complete waste.
Something that you brought up, and it just reminds me of how perspective can influence things, how people don't assume that you and Mark are a couple that have been married for 16 years, because I go to basketball games and I see it as normal because I've met a lot of biracial athletes over my 14 years of doing high school games.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think anything of it, but I'm used to it. And your story is just a reminder that not everyone else is.
Mm-hmm. Well, they may be used to it, but secretly maybe they don't accept it. And that's the thing, a lot of people, and that's kind of, unfortunately, you know, and we talk, unfortunately and fortunately, I feel like in the last few years, a lot of the racist views have come out from under the rock because there's been a green light to now spew that hatred. And I say, hey, I'd rather you be like that than be nice to our face and then talk about how you don't approve of a family of ours behind our back. I would rather you be upfront, because at least I know then where you're coming from. You know, I obviously don't like it. I obviously think it's pretty crappy, but I also would rather, if somebody had those racist views, to be upfront about it than to say, oh, look at this view, and then behind our, my daughter dating a black guy, or, you know, I wouldn't, that's not something that we would want to do. And you think it's crazy, but there really are a lot of people that are okay with their kids having black friends, but if their kid wanted to go to prom with somebody or potentially date somebody or marry somebody, that would be a completely different story.
And that wrinkle in race relations I've seen play out in film like The Hate You Give and others that have explored the journey and the obstacles that come with Black identity. And then for the three of you, Allie, go ahead.
You have to support all Black people. You just can't support Black athletes. And that's really, really important. You can't just support somebody because you love watching them on TV and they're really super gifted and talented on the basketball court. And you do see that a lot, even in football and things like that. You know, it's like you love this guy because he's your favorite athlete, but you don't like any other minorities are not okay. And, you know, I think that it's really important for people to ask themselves, you know, as a whole, as a race, you know, am I supporting that these people have equal rights just like me, not just because they're athletes, but because they're human beings.
As I was going to say, for the three of you, and Allie, you told us a couple of these stories, but feel free to be as blunt or as transparent as you'd like about this. Any moments, interactions that emphasized how important this issue of racism and treatment, ensuring that Black Lives Matter, what was a moment, interaction, story that you reflect on that illustrated how serious this issue is?
So many.
Um,
I'll tell a story that a few years ago I sent Mark to return a pair of pants for me to Target at 4:30 in the afternoon. Comes out of Target, cops grab him, put his hands behind his back, drag him down the strip mall to a wine shop and put him in front of the owner and say, is this the guy? A 5'7" light-skinned Black male had robbed that wine shop. And Mark is 6'2", 6'3", you know, not light-skinned, not short, didn't fit the description at all, except he was Black. And, you know, this is at 4:30 in the afternoon, and I have people calling me going, Mark's getting arrested. You know, somebody who saw him in the parking lot. And, you know, for me, I'm thinking there's so many instances where basically he couldn't even stand up for himself, because that could have gotten him killed. He just basically had to let the situation play out where he knew that the guy would look at him and say, no, that's not him. He is a coach, he's a business owner, he's a college graduate, he's a dad, he's a husband, and they basically completely diminished him as a person because the color of his skin, that was enough cause for them to embarrass him, put his hands behind his back, and basically call him a suspect. Now, that is something as a white person, we would be throwing our hands up in the air. This isn't right. This is unacceptable. Black people don't have that right because it will get them killed. And there are so many instances like that where, you know, again, there's nothing I can do. All I can do is basically, I called the police chief, I called the ACLU, I called, you know, my producers said, I want to cover this. And Mark said, this isn't new. This happens every single day to not only me, but other Black men, and it's not going to make a difference. And that to me it's sad in itself, because it really, no matter how much attention you call to it, it just keeps happening. So in turn, he was right. It wouldn't have made a difference if we covered it on the news, or, you know, the police chief called and apologized to him because he didn't want me to embarrass him on on air and do that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, they probably did it again. And that's what's really frustrating.
And then Ava or Mark, well, we heard a pretty compelling story and tough to hear for me. But Ava, is that something you've had to deal with? What growing up in school, when you go to tournaments or attend classes, anything that illustrates some of the difficulties that come with your identity?
Sometimes like when I used to play traveling basketball and I used to go to like different schools every weekend just to play at these gyms, I've noticed like the gym at my school isn't as nice as like a gym that you'd find in like Wayzata or somewhere around there, or like Shakopee or something. And I just don't think like, I don't really think it's fair, but there's really nothing I can do about it because that's just how it is. And people, like, as much as we try like to make like an awareness about it and like speak up about it, there's always just going to be that person who won't listen and is just going to keep continuing to do these things that are completely unequal and unfair for all of these kids who can't who are too young to pretty much do anything. Like, they can't speak up for themselves. They just have to accept the fact that this gym is 10 times nicer, 10 times newer than the one that they use at school.
Yeah, the schools that are have predominantly minority kids, just, you know, it's very clear, and kids notice that. Also, even in her AAU organization she was in, they, I think, had one black coach, one. And you got to really think about that. That's actually a really good thing to look into, because can you really justify how in the entire world of basketball, a lot of these AAU organizations have one black coach? You know, some of them have none. So why is that? Are they saying that black people can't coach basketball? Because I know there's been people who have applied, they just don't get it. They don't get the job. So again, what message is that sending to African American kids who, again, they're good enough to, I guess, play it? And again, I will say a lot of these AAU organizations, they're not going to put 8 black kids on a team. Have you ever seen it in one of the larger organizations? They won't do it. And I'm just calling it like I see it. And it is the truth. And I think that if all of these, you know, and yet these organizations, I see them tweet Black Lives Matter and things like that, well, stand behind that.
Do something.
What are you going to do other than it's the hot hashtag to do? What are you going to do about it for your black players or the black players in your community? And that's what I want to see. I don't really care who does the hashtag and who does the politically correct thing. I want to see, what are you going to do about it? Let me see it reflected in your organization. And I think these kids are smart enough. I know Ava has pointed it out. I know these kids are smart enough to look and say, this is what's going on. And that's sad within itself.
You reminded me of a point Henry Lake made just a few days ago on his radio
my
show
buddy.
about, yeah, so, and I'm not name dropping. Well, I'm not name dropping him for that reason, but
Yeah.
I listened to a couple of his programs recently after the death of Chadwick Boseman and after the wake of another black man suffering a fate that he didn't deserve. And Henry, very passionate about this, and he issued a similar challenge to fellow media members along the lines of what you said, Allie, with how it may seem the cool or trendy thing to do to say we support this or to put a hashtag, but
Absolutely.
what concrete action are you doing to follow up on that? And I remember in the case of Henry, you know, he was with KFAN for many years, went to Kansas City, came back, but I think at KFAN, he was the only prominent sports anchor of color at that station. And correct me if I'm wrong, and there's a more representation at CCO Radio now, but I remember reading a couple articles where he was interviewed discussing that experience. And I think it goes along with what you're saying, Allie. How do you take a hashtag? It's one thing to put out a statement or a tweet. It's another to follow up on that and take bigger steps forward.
I would like to see it reflected in the organization. Otherwise, it's so transparent. It's so transparent and inauthentic. And I think it's really important that that we really start to call people out on this, because we are all intelligent people. We all are understanding this is a matter of life and death for many, many people. And this isn't just so you can say, well, the NBA is doing it, we need to stand behind it. I pay attention to that kind of thing. And when somebody does the hashtag or somebody, does this kind of faux support, I pay attention to see what's following up with that. And I'll tell you, 95% of the time, nothing is done. And Henry and I just had this conversation. We were texting the other day, and we actually were talking about the AAU circuit. And the thing, basically, unfortunately, you have the Black organizations that will allow they'll allow, basically, if you can play, you can be on the team. Doesn't matter if we have 8 Black kids on the team or 4 Black kids, whatever. But then you have the larger basketball organizations where you never see that represented. I think it's important that people start asking that question: why? Where are the coaches of color? Where are you telling me that you only have 20 players of color across all teams? Demi on her team, she was the only Black kid on her team. Why is that? So I think it's important, these topics can't be taboo anymore. We need to start talking about them. And we need to not be afraid to ask these questions. And I think in Minnesota, people, a lot of times, they want to keep it nice. They don't want to stir the pot, but I'm handing you the spoon and encouraging you to please start stirring the pot, because it is important that we don't let all of this that has happen in vain.
And Ava, something I wanted to follow up on with the point you made a little while ago. What conversations have you had with your teammates, either in high school or AAU, when you heard about George Floyd, when you saw what happened to Jacob Blake, and then when you learned about sports leagues pausing and stopping their play, and how that led to some changes and pretty rapid succession? Milwaukee, I know, reached out to the state attorney general and the lieutenant governor of Wisconsin after they suspended their playoff series, and that led to a special session. I don't know how that's going, but it wasn't just Milwaukee doing this to bring attention. They took that next step. So I digress, but Eva, what kind of conversations have you had with teammates, friends, and just how have you absorbed all of these events in what has been a turbulent summer period?
Well, at first, no, none of my teammates really thought about it as a really huge deal, I would say. But as it started to happen more and more, I feel like not all of them took it as seriously as they could have, but they were just starting to realize this is what's going on, and they can. I'm not sure if they did it for the hashtag or if they actually meant something out of it, but I know at least one of my teammates, we used to talk about what was just going on, because me and her are the same. We're both biracial. We both have one Black parent and one white parent, and it's just the people my other teammates who don't have that type of that in their lives. I don't feel like they understand it as much because it didn't really apply to them. So they posted about it, but I just don't really think that they meant it genuinely. But I mean, I felt like this is really a problem, and it's really not okay for this all to be happening, and for all this all these riots to be happening, and now sports being they're going on strike. I really don't think that it should have gotten to this point, because it's this is really unacceptable, and people should have done something from the start and not waited until all these people stopped doing these things and people are burning down buildings and all this. Like, I don't think that it should have gotten to this point, and people should have just addressed it from the start and made a difference now, or made a difference like in the past, and not let like right now it shouldn't be this bad. Like, people should not wait all this time to do something.
And it's worth noting, in the midst of this sweeping change and discussion that athletes are bringing, Nafisa Collier a few days ago was interviewed about it and said a part of it is that people pay more attention to sports than politics. And some commentators have noted the absurdity that athletes are being looked upon to bring about these changes when, you know, they're not the ones holding elected offices. But the movement has to start somewhere. And so the reason I bring that up, Eva, I know it's a lot. You're making your way through. You're going to be starting high school officially. You're coming off a solid 8th grade season. Who knows what the winter will look like. But how do you think this is helping you find your voice and find your inner advocate at such a young age?
I think that even though I'm young, I know I can I know I can help make a difference, because all this happening is happening to people like me, people like my dad, people like my sister, and the rest of my family. And it just motivates me, because just because I'm like not fully Black and I have white in me doesn't mean that I can take their side and just push it away, and that I can make a difference. Just like, I can just think about like my family and my friends that this is like all happening to, and like people shouldn't have to worry about like leaving their house at night or driving in their car or going to the store or something like simple like that. Like, I think that I really want to like help make a difference, because I don't want this to happen anymore.
Do you think we could see a similar gesture, a similar action from high school teams? I don't want to predict the future, and I certainly hope we don't have to be in the news for something as disheartening as George Floyd, but I fear we've already been in the news, my home state, your home state, 3 times. So who knows? But do you see yourself, maybe other high school athletes, high school teams considering a pause? I don't know what jurisdiction any of them have, but I'm sure everyone heard about what Milwaukee did. And now that we saw 5, I think, so many of these major sports leagues take part, I imagine multiple high school athletes, high school teams may feel more empowered to take drastic measures if they deem it necessary. Is that something you would consider, Ava, or what are some other things you see yourself doing if you feel this conversation isn't moving forward as it should?
Yeah, I feel like if that was what we needed to do, as much as like I don't want to do it because I like playing basketball and I want to play games, but if that is something, like, I would be all for it, because I do not want this to go on anymore. And I also think that just like using basketball as a way to just put out there like that Black lives do matter, and that like all these Black lives that are just being put at risk every single day. I think that as us being known like in the state, I think that we can really use basketball just to put that out there.
And I think it's important that Black Lives Matter isn't a political thing. It's human rights, and I think that to take the political, undertones that some people like to put on that statement is wrong, because this really has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with the fact that systemic racism is in pretty much every fiber of our society, and even in sports and schools and workplace and interactions with police and so on and so forth. And I think that even when high school athletes can speak out and say, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, and say it, and be willing even to put their season on the line. I mean, those kids, just how younger kids look up to NBA players, a lot of little kids look up to these high school players. And again, it's that domino effect again of making a change.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
With Paige Beckers, Adalia McKenzie, Ava, I'm sure you have, what's the word? Bustling. I was going to say blustering, but that's not right. Bustling fan base. You probably have like tens of thousands of followers already, right?
Working
I
on
tease.
it.
One at a time. So Mark and Allie, yes, I almost got Allie and Ava mixed up. Gotta love these Zoom interviews, but Mark and Allie, Mark, of course, you played basketball in high school and college, and Allie, I don't know what your background in athletics was. You didn't play, but I'm sure you were a fan, and well, you hung around athletes, and as we can see, you're just, yeah. Yes, I remember how you told me people still ask you if you played basketball.
Not a day goes by that I don't get asked. So I'm just going to start saying I did. So spread the word. I was the best in the state.
And again, it goes back to perspective because I've covered the WNBA for 10 years. I've covered high school and college as well. And so, yes, I've met a lot of tall athletes, but I don't automatically assume they played basketball. One of my good friends who coached at Park Center, her daughter played there, now playing D1, had another daughter who was taller than she is, but never played a minute of hoops. In any event, you've been around long enough, whether as an athlete in Mark's case or as a fan observer in Allie's case, to see the timeline, how the culture around sports has shifted. What do you make of this bigger push toward advocating for social causes and related subjects, growing up in a time where athletes were more reluctant? The WNBA, I think Sue Bird has shared stories about how there was a much more cautious attitude in its early years because they were worried about branding, about upsetting potential sponsors or networking connections. And that veil has vanished over the last few years.
Yes, well, I mean, even just a few years ago, and even today, people still want to insist that Colin Kaepernick is kneeling because he hates America. And you could tell someone till you're blue in the face 10 times over that no, he is protesting against police brutality. And some people don't want to hear that. And so again, it's a message that has been going on for a long time, and many athletes in the past have been exiled or not supported or cut from teams because of their speaking out on social injustice. And I'm hoping that now we see a shift in that. We see that it becomes more accepted, more the norm, and encouraged by these owners. And again, these owners now, I hope that a lot of them had an awakening about racial injustice, but I think a lot of them know that if they don't support this, they're not going to have a team. They're not going to have players who want to play for them. And if that's what it takes, then that's what it's going to need to take.
And I think on a high school level, it is more about the administrators acknowledging that this is an issue, because a lot of the things, I mean, these high school girls have a say, but everyone knows in high school athletics, the school administration controls everything, like what they can do, what they can't do. I even remember back when Colin Kaepernick was taking a knee, and a lot of the school administrations sent emails to the high school coaches saying, do not allow any of your players to take a knee.
Just a few years
ago. So even if the coach is saying, hey, I want my players to have freedom of expression, they can do whatever they want to do, they can express their personal beliefs, it's a totally, open culture on the team, the administration still controls the actions of the team. So it really is, it's great that these girls or these high school athletes want to express, and make a change, but it really starts with the school administrations allowing these students to express themselves. And until that happens, it doesn't matter how Ava feels, doesn't matter how we feel as parents. Even me as a coach, there are certain things that I cannot do because my administration will not allow me to do it. and they have sent me letters or emails saying, hey, we would appreciate it if you did not do this. So the school, the people who are in power need to acknowledge that this is an issue and allow these girls or these athletes to have a voice to express what is going on in the world. Because as you can tell, these high school athletes are smart. They know what's going on, and they get it, and they probably get it more so than the administration does.
Mhm.
So the
Well, and a lot of
administration
times-
the administrators of these schools need to take a step back and just see what happens, because obviously what we have been doing isn't working. So allow these kids, because again, they're smart. They know what's going on. They actually have their finger on the pulse of what's going on in society way more than most of these adults do. That they can make the good decisions and allow and start to make a change.
To that point, what would you make of the increased visibility? Because a lot has changed even from 4 years ago when the Lynx did the Change Starts With Us campaign on their shirts and Colin Kaepernick took a knee. More people are becoming understanding of it. Not everyone is. There's still a ways to go. And even going back from 4 years ago to when you were making your way as an athlete, it was almost impossible, it seems, to get your story out there through traditional channels. I think the increase in social media, the ability to share your thoughts without a filter, has enlightened us in ways that wouldn't have been possible 10, 20 years ago. But from your perspective, Mark and Ali, observing the culture around athletics and social issues, what would you make of this increase in attention to what's going on?
I would say, like, I would say as us and how we've dealt in our children's athletic adventures, we are okay with offending people and making people uncomfortable. And I think that's what it is you have to, like Ali said, you have to pick a side and be on that side. And if it offends people, it's okay, because again, they'll let you know how they feel about it. But again, there's no way that we're going to change, anything is going to change unless people become uncomfortable and acknowledge that they are uncomfortable. Right. So you have to, that's why I'm saying with the admin in high school, these administrators have to be uncomfortable. So these athletes can make the administration uncomfortable to try to make a change.
Well, and a lot of times it's a white administrator telling Black kids like Ava how they should feel. And as a white person who has a Black family, I would never tell them how they should feel about racial injustice and being profiled and things like that. And that goes beyond my family. That goes beyond that. Even an administrator can't tell these minority athletes to say, hey, this isn't right. This is, you can't express yourself in this way because this isn't the time or place. Well, where is the time or place? This is their public platform, and you don't want them on social media. You don't want them talking. You want their social media to be college, coach approved and things like that. So, these games and things like that, this is their platform. And they're doing it respectfully, but they're taking a stance and they're taking a side. And I would support Ava 1000% in doing that. And I always tell her that I have your back 1000% when you do the right thing. If people don't like it, I'll help you handle it on the back end, because that's just how we operate as a family. And again, I encourage more white people to understand that Black people have been talking about this for years. They're tired of telling white people how this feels. It's time for us to listen and to be a part of the change and to not play it safe and be like, well, it doesn't affect me. This doesn't affect me. You can't talk on issues. I see more people post about adopt, don't shop animals than they do talking about let's treat everybody equally. It's not right. And let's really put a mirror to ourselves and say, are we speaking up for people who have been telling us for years that they are being profiled, they're facing police brutality, discriminated against? I mean, it is time I feel it's time for white people to really step up and say, we need to listen and we need to do something about this, along with all of the Black people that have been telling us what's been going on for years.
Something that I mentioned with my guest in my last podcast, and I'll bring it up here because you discussed having to make a decision. And I know for me, that came 4 years ago when I was on the Lynx beat. And it was in the wake of Philando Castile's death. And I get a email from Lynx PR saying the team was going to make a special announcement. Nobody really knew what that meant. And then I saw the shirts, and it didn't take me long to realize this is the announcement. This is their leap of faith that they're taking. And I want to say what the Lynx did was a forerunner to what we're seeing now. And much like Maya Moore taking time off from her professional career to help her friend Jonathan Irons, and that led to a successful overturn in his conviction. Now, more athletes are doing the same thing in the midst of this pandemic, but up until 4 years ago, I don't want to say I was indifferent, but I was cautious, much like you had talked about. I wasn't sure how folks are going to handle it. And I try to understand as much as I can too, because I'm smart enough to know that I don't know everything. And so I don't want to make a knee-jerk reaction and take one side or the other without understanding why people feel the way they do. And then I felt with my role as a sports reporter, I didn't know how much you could weave current events into it. Well, the Lynx took away that shield almost instantly. And that was my breaking point, proverbially speaking, when I had to decide which side of history I was going to be on. And even though I don't maybe advocate as loudly as others would, I wrote a few stories about the Change Starts With Us campaign, how that inspired their fans to take up the cause, and they sold replica shirts and donated the proceeds to an inner city high school in Minneapolis. And I will never forget, one of my fellow writers from the Star Tribune read my first column trying to process or analyze what this meant for the team, what this meant for the league. And he praised me for my work. And I don't know how everyone else thought about it, but that was enough of a validation to not only prove that I could weave sports and current events together, but that I can understand why the Lynx are doing what they're doing and not feel a need to challenge that. So that was my decision time 4 years ago, and I haven't looked back. I haven't dealt with a lot of blowback. Maybe it's because of my style, but I'm sure you've seen my summer podcast series. And if you haven't, I had a lot of guests on, and including some high school athletes. And Mark, you're absolutely right. They do know what's going on. They're paying attention. They may be a little more shy than us adults just because they're not used to having a mic in front of them all the time, but that hasn't stopped them from sharing their feelings.
Right.
And I have no regrets about bringing guests on and having them share their stories, because I feel the best way to move this conversation is to have voices go with the faces. I think it's easy, and I understand it's easy to share stories on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. At the same time, I feel it can be passive. I want my audience and anyone else who may be tuning in, your audience, to understand that these are real emotions you're experiencing. And when you hear about Jacob Blake or George Floyd or Breonna Taylor, it does evoke an emotional response.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I mean, Jacob Blake could have easily been Mark. Easily. And that's just facts. So I think, again, we just need to take away the veil of playing it safe and call it like it is, and demand that in all areas of sports and school, and that we're not going to accept inequality anymore. But again, you have to be willing to step out on something that really doesn't affect you at all. And that, to me, shows a true person of character. It's easy to stand up for something that affects you directly because you're feeling it every single day. When it doesn't affect you directly, but it's still completely wrong and you look at it and you're disgusted by it. It's really easy to be disgusted by it. And, oh, man, it's terrible. You think about it for a little while and then go back to your life. A real person of character says, this doesn't affect me or my family directly, but at the end of the day, I'm a person that advocates for equality for all people. It's just, I have so many friends in the LGBTQ community. That doesn't affect me directly. I'm not gay. I am in a heterosexual marriage, but I advocate very strong for them because that is what's right. And I think that is what I urge people to do, is just, even if this doesn't affect you or your kids directly, this is life, and this is why we're here.
I think what people get confused with the movement is they act like minorities are asking for more, and they're just asking for the same. It's equality. We're not asking for your piece.
Yeah.
We're just asking for equality.
I mean, it's the all lives matter, people. All lives will matter when Black lives matter. It's very simple. It's very simple. And so when someone comes back with that hashtag, I already know. I already know that they've made up their mind that it's easier when you blindly support the police, even when there's a video out there. You know, you are literally choosing to look at injustice and look at murder and look at all of these terrible things and accept it because it doesn't affect you directly. And that is not a person of character. And that's how we always raise our kids, is even if it doesn't affect you directly, you have to stand up for what is right. And I think that is a message that people really need to do some soul searching and ask themselves, you know, is that how they are living their life? And I think it's a crossroads right now. And I think it's important that people make that right turn.
We are certainly at a crossroads, and something I remind myself too is just to keep myself open and understand that my views, my perspectives are still evolving, and they always will. And even though, as you alluded to, Ali, issues affecting Blacks and other people of color don't affect us directly, you and I have hung around basketball for a long time. I cut my chops covering the St. Paul Central super team in the mid 2000s. I covered Como Park when Andrea Adams was the big superstar. And I still, cover a lot of teams who have rosters that don't look like me. And so even if it doesn't affect me, I have a lot of friends who could be impacted by that. And that's where my mind goes to in these situations, whether it was George Floyd or Philando Castile, Jamar Clark, and even with video and things like that. So even if it depicts something, I think you get what I'm trying to say. In the case of George Floyd, I remember saying that an alleged forgery should not result in your death. So even if there was something going on, it's just understanding the situation and all
It's
the
two
people
different
that
sets of
should
rules.
still be here.
It's two different sets of rules, and it's very clear. But every person knows that, every Black person or every person who's married to a Black person or has Black kids knows that if something happens and a Black person gets murdered by police, there's always a very large group of people that are immediately looking for what they did wrong. And it's so frustrating and maddening, and it's, and I think, again, it's being perpetuated with the administration that we have now, the hate, and it makes me sick. And so, again, no matter how loud the hate is, I'm going to talk louder. So, and that's what I owe to myself, to my kids, to my husband, to everybody else, whether I know them or not. That's, you don't even have to have one Black friend and to stand on the side of what's right.
So what kind of conversations have you had with each other when you hear about these transgressions, and how do you keep yourself from getting overwhelmed? Because a common refrain that I've heard from a lot of my Black friends and those who support them is how tired they are and how exhausting it is. One of my friends actually had to seek out the help of a therapist just to process her feelings. And I understand that. Again, it's not something I would necessarily experience, but if others need that vessel to release themselves, then do what you have to do. How do you
Well,
make sure you're right?
Personally, you would not believe the amount of messages that I get from people that say, I just got one from, I'm not going to say her name, but she sent me a message and said, I used to look at your posts and think, God, why does she always make everything about race when this happens? And she said, I just want to send you a message and apologize, because I realized it was easier for me to dismiss you and dismiss what was going on is, oh, she's just complaining about race, and race isn't always what affects her family and things like that. And so, and her basically saying, I'm now in a stage where I'm trying to learn, and I'm admitting that I did prejudge people. And that's the thing. No matter where you're starting from, you got to go in the right direction. And so I personally, that fuels me to use my platform that I have and that I've spent many, many years to build, to really speak out. And I do get a lot of people that message me and say, thank you for speaking out, because I've been speaking out for years and no one has been listening. And so I think that, again, it's just important to take that anger that you have, and obviously you're going to be very angry. I mean, we watched that George Floyd video when Trayvon Martin got murdered, when Breonna Taylor's the cops who killed Breonna Taylor still have not been arrested. It's literally the most maddening thing, and it can make you angry all the time. But I think it's important to take that anger and really channel it into advocating and speaking about it, and being honest and having these conversations a lot of people are uncomfortable having, and you have to start it. And, we always talk about the weather here in Minnesota. How about talking about why haven't they arrested the cops that killed Breonna Taylor? Why don't we have a conversation about that? And I think it's important that we realize that that's the whole purpose we're here on this earth, is to do the right thing, to take care of each other, and to demand equality for every single person. And so that's kind of where my motivation goes. And I know my kids they are little activists. But even Demi at 10 years old, we have very frank conversations with them on a daily basis. I don't shield them, and Mark doesn't shield them from anything, because it's important to know that even though they're biracial, they are strong black women. Barack Obama was biracial. Nobody ever calls him the first biracial president. So it's important for them to identify as strong black women. And for me to say, well, you're biracial too, really that's making it about me and not about them. And, I 100% support them identifying themselves as strong black women, and I am so proud of them.
And Ava and Mark, I know, Mark, you've been through a lot that would infuriate a lot of other people. And Ava, whether it's your own experiences or hearing some of the things your parents have endured, I imagine the two of you have experienced a wave of emotions this summer and over these last few years. What are some things you two do to maintain your mental health and ensure that it doesn't weigh on you in a negative way?
I mean, for me, it's just, it's just life. I mean, it's not like I'm not surprised anymore. So for me, when I wake up, I'm disappointed when I see it, like something like this happen when George. But I'm over the shock. I'm over the. I'm almost numb to it at this point, because it's just life. It's literally like, just wake up and, okay, yes, this happened. But it's not anything new to me. So this has been going on forever, as long as I've been alive. So I just have to make sure that I understand this is how the world is. And unfortunately, you have to play by the rules that are out in front of you. So if I'm outside and I get pulled over by the police, I have to behave in a certain way to make sure that I can get through this traffic stop so I can go home. And then you have to live your life by a different set of rules, but you got to know what they are. And that's the only way you get through it. I mean, it's tiring. So I guess the question is, what am I doing? I'm not really doing anything. It's not weighing me down because it's my everyday life. I mean,
It's not new.
It's not anything new. So I don't have to seek help because it's something that I've grown up with. It's just my world that I live in.
What about you?
I agree.
I mean, Ava, up until 3rd grade, she went to a predominantly white elementary school. And we would fight, even the teachers, they would assume that she wasn't smart. Where other kids would be immediately put in the higher, the gifted classes, they would make Ava go through half of the school year to basically prove to them that she could be in the gifted classes. We've had other white families tell us that, I literally had a mother say to me that Ava can be her daughter's friend, but not her main friend. And it's because, I mean, you just, a lot of, and we basically took Ava out of that school for some things that happened. It's just school right in Maple Grove. And that's why she came over to, we literally moved our entire life over to Brooklyn Park to get more diversity for our kids so they can feel free to be who they are. And that's why we love living over here. Because Ava goes to Osseo, which is a very diverse school. Demi will go there as well. And I had somebody from Maple Grove say, "You're going over there? That's like trading in a Lamborghini for a Camry." And that's the kind of ignorance that you get. But again, it's not going to stop us from succeeding. I'll tell you that. It's not. And we have worked very hard as a family to create a family business, to be successful, and we're going to continue to do it, whether people like it or not.
Hey, I went to Harding for high school. I grew up in the inner city neighborhoods of St. Paul, and I'm still in one piece. So, and the funny thing is, nobody would ever suspect it because of who I am, who I look like, my communication style. But again, it goes back to how you don't know what's going on until you get an opportunity to know somebody. So, hey, a Lamborghini for a Camry, that could be a great trade value, the way I see it.
Longer.
Yeah. And of course, I've built some strong rapport in those communities too. So I know it's not everybody. I've covered some high school games in Maple Grove, and one of the former assistants took the job at Osseo, and I know Doug going back to our days covering state. So I know there are a lot of
amazing. Doug is absolutely amazing. So we love him.
And so, and I bring that up so that my audience understands there are people out there who, are in support of what you're doing, understand why people are having these conversations. It's just important to know where people are or know who to look for. I think that's where I'm getting at. What have you enjoyed most about being part of this multiracial family? I know that post you made, Allie, I think it was back in the winter, early spring, how you've enjoyed every second of it. So for the three of you, what do you enjoy most about being part of this interracial family and getting an opportunity to educate others about your perspectives and then learn from others?
I mean, I just enjoy my family, regardless. So I think that I think for me, it's important that I understand as a white woman with Black children that I need to not tell my kids that things that are happening aren't happening. And I see that happen sometimes in interracial families where that might be downplayed. And I think it's important that I always validate my family's feelings, but we are just a strong family in general, regardless of race, and we stick together, and that's it. That's kind of family over everything, and that's kind of how we operate. And we really identify ourselves as a hardworking family. My kids work harder than anybody you'll ever meet, and we try to model that for them.
think you said, Allie, if Ava and Demi could be in the gym, what, 24 hours a day or something like that, they
They
would?
would. They literally, I mean, Ava doesn't miss a day of open gym. She can't go to open gym. She's downstairs shooting. They watch film. I mean, I always tell Ava and Demi that we will invest the time and money into their sports goals if they're investing the time and without us making them. And they always deliver on that and then some. So, I think that if you follow us, you see how hard they work. And that's what I'm most proud of is they don't take shortcuts. They literally are the hardest working kids I've ever met. And I've been a trainer for 23 years. So they literally are the hardest working people I know when it comes to training their bodies and staying disciplined and not complaining. And that's what I'm most proud of when it comes to their sports. It's not how many points they have. It's truly the dedication that they have. And that to me is invaluable.
And then Ava and Mark, is there anything you wanted to add about what you've enjoyed being part of this multiracial family and the opportunity you have to educate folks like myself and anyone else who might be watching or interact with you about what's going on and why you are making your presence clear about the Black Lives Matter discussion, about issues that affect you? What have you enjoyed most about being together?
I think it's cool to be different in that I enjoy it, and I enjoy having this family because I love all of my family, and I am going to no matter what skin color they are. And I think that even though like some things like aren't like just because I'm not fully Black, I can still educate people, and I want people to know, and I want people to realize that these problems are going on. And even if I wasn't Black, I would still do it because I just want everyone to feel like they're being treated equally. But in order to do that, we have to have Black lives. Black lives have to matter for everyone to matter.
I would say, I mean, I just get to hang out with some really cool people. It's a great family. I mean, I love these ladies that I get to spend my life with. And again, we don't wake up every day saying we're going to go educate the world. We just try to live by example. And, if you ask, we'll answer the question, but we feel the way we carry ourselves are the way that we just try to lead by example and we're not trying to preach. We're not saying we're perfect, but we try to do the right thing all the time. And again, my family's great.
For the three of you, since we started this podcast discussing the impact and the significance of sports leagues going on strike for several days to bring attention to what happened to Jacob Blake and to all of these instances where communities of color feel marginalized, where do you see this movement going or evolving? Because now we know players are willing to risk their position in a playoff series, their paycheck, their career prospects to make their voices heard. How do you see that evolving both in the sports world and in the overall landscape?
Well, it's a series of steps. So now we are in the protest stage or the protest step. Now the next step is policy change. So now we have to have a change in policy so that people of color or people who are marginalized now have the same rights as everybody else. So then once we have policy change, then we have to have policy leadership change. So then we have to have people in positions who make the actual decisions look like the people who they are changing the policy for. So it goes in steps. So you have to take one step. So we've protested. We've said, hey, this is not right. We're not going to take it anymore. So the next step is we have to get out there and vote and change the actual policy. So we have to have policy change so it now reflects equality for everyone. And then in that process, you change the leadership of who's actually making the decisions. So by voting, you change policy and you change leadership, which then is a trickle down thing. So then now you have equal representation of people who are making the actual decisions, reflects the actual demographic of who they're making the decisions for. And that's how equality happens, but it goes in steps. So you have to walk up the step. You have to walk up the ladder by changing each step. You're changing policy, you're changing leadership. Once you get leadership to change, then that trickles down to affecting the quality of life for the demographic who is marginalized.
And then Allie and Ava, where do you see this going with what the pro sports leagues did? Where do you see this going as far as sports, as far as society? What do you think?
I hope it means
Right.
people are going to go to the polls on November 3rd and vote. And I hope it means that police who are killing Black people are going to be held accountable. I hope that they get the same due process and the same outcome that, you know, you have a police that you already know the officers are going to get off with George Floyd. I'm pretty sure they are. And the reason why I know that is because they get off on every other case where they blatantly are killing Black people. So where I want to see it go is I want people to go to the polls. I want people to go and vote on November 3rd, and I want police officers to start being held accountable, and to not give a blatant support for police when they are killing Black people. Now, if police are doing a great job, just like anybody in any job, if they are doing a good job and following the rules, then I commend them. But this is a hired position that police officers are in. They are not executioners. They don't get to just go around and shoot people. If they feel threatened, and if they're not properly trained, then they're in the wrong job. And so I feel very strongly that that's where the change needs to go immediately. So there are no more Jacob Blakes. There's no more, there's no reason someone should get shot in the back 7 times. How are we going to justify that this time? There's no reason someone should have their foot on somebody's neck for almost 9 minutes. So, this needs to stop, and it needs to stop before another person is killed.
And Ava, where do you see this conversation evolving? Because when you do start school, I understand you'll be starting online at least at the beginning of the year, but in some way, shape, or form, you'll reconvene with your classmates and you'll get to meet some new classmates as you start at Osseo. What kind of conversations do you think will occur now that the Bucks and several other professional sports leagues have demonstrated that they are willing to put everything they have on hold in order to bring about change?
I think that more people will start being more aware about it, and will hold these police officers accountable, and all these other people who are making things unequal, holding them accountable for what they're doing, and just try to just think about what they can do to just help make a difference, what they can do to help keep their friends and their family safe, and what they can do to just make sure that everyone is feeling safe in their environment and that everyone is being treated equally, even at school, just make sure that everyone is being treated the same, and that people shouldn't get special privileges just because they're a certain skin color, or shouldn't be treated unfairly because they're a different skin color, or just whatever.
Before we go, any advice that you would offer to anybody who is looking to learn more about social issues, social causes?
I would say, be open to maybe acknowledging the fact that you don't maybe you don't know everything or that you weren't paying attention. Just being willing to say, hey, I was wrong. Or hey, I didn't do enough. I think sometimes that's really hard for people to say. Excuse me, I think there's also so many great organizations that have popped up, especially after George Floyd. Our company aligns with a company called Mothers Against Injustice. There's so many organizations that are like that are supporting the Black Lives Matter movement in various ways, and I think anybody can actively go find organizations that are supporting Black causes. And then also, again, please go vote November 3rd.
Mark and Ava, any tips from you?
Education is the key. I mean, there's lots of ways. There's lots of information out there. If you feel like if you're against, or you just don't know what to do, you're throwing your hands and saying, "Oh, I don't know what to do," just go to Google and just Google what Black Lives Matter actually stands for, and familiarize yourself with what that organization is all about. Not what people tell you it's about, but actually what they stand for. It's not a terrorist, what they're trying to achieve, and then go from there. You start it. I mean, that's the beauty of it. You can find out exactly what they stand for. It's there in black and white, and then you can go. Once you understand that, then you can pick an organization that lines themselves up with those values and then make a change.
And Ava, what would you offer to anyone who wants to learn more?
If you're gonna post about it, I think that you should really you should really care about it and not just post because everyone else is doing it. No, it's like a trend or something. I think even if you don't know about it, I think that you should just make an effort to learn about it and just look into some of the things that have happened in the past. And then when you post about it, you'll actually know.
And don't set off the dogs. What was that last part, Ava?
When you post about it, once you've learned a little bit more about it, you'll actually know what you're posting will actually have a meaning, and you'll actually feel like you care about it, and you can make a difference.
We'll see what happens. I do believe what the Milwaukee Bucks did and how that spread to other leagues in rapid succession will change this discussion in an influential way. To what effect, we don't know yet, but we're seeing them take steps that have never happened before. And I'm curious, hopefully they don't have to go any further, but if they have to, it's clear they're not going to back down. They are fully committed to this cause, and they have the support from the league staffers in the NBA and WNBA. So it's like you said, they made a choice. They're not looking back.
Right, 100%. We stand with them.
And of course, you can follow Allie and Mark at Core Camper. Allie, of course, taping several segments that appear on WCCO and around the country. I know Yahoo, I believe, has shared some of your work. So wherever you are, if you don't live in the Twin Cities, you can get your fitness tips from Allie. And I understand a couple of them involve some everyday household objects you can use to expand your fitness regimen as we still navigate this pandemic.
That's right.
And Ava, you will find her getting buckets at Osseo High School. We hope this upcoming winter, and I certainly wish you luck as you get ready for your big tournament in Indianapolis. I know you're coming off a solid AAU season, and then to start the school year by taking a trip to Indy. Not many can say that. I imagine, well, I know you've been invited to camps before, but I have to believe you are excited about getting the chance to travel for a national tournament before you start school.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Well, wherever your career takes you, I know you're going to be an advocate and a vessel for anyone that wants to learn more. And so I'm excited to see how you grow both as an athlete, an activist, and as a source of information for anyone in need of education.
Right.
Thank you.
So, Allie
Thank you,
Holman,
Mike.
yes, Allie Holman, Mark Holman, who had to take care of the dog and a couple of other things. But we want to thank everyone who took the time out, and I want to thank Demi too for making her appearance.
Yeah.
That's a name you'll be hearing in the next few years, we hope, in the
for sure.
basketball scene. But once again, thanks for taking the time, and best of luck as you begin the school year and as you get ready for this big Indy trip.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you want to be a guest on a future program, just contact us at tsbtelevision@gmail.com or hit me up on social media at @MikePeden on Twitter and Instagram. That does it for this edition of Mic'd Up Sports. Thanks for watching.